So what had to happen first? Well, God said in the beginning, let there be light, and there was light. And you will note here now that he was the light all the way up to day 4 before he made the sun, moon and stars to measure the days, to measure the months, to measure the seasons and to measure the years and to measure the 24-hour day cycle. Now in this series, what had to happen first? You'll notice now on day 2, Yahweh is preparing everything that is needed to sustain life. Firstly, notice the earth completely encapsulated in water, and as you see the white ring representing the sky, firmament or air, etc., he's now divided the waters from above the waters to the waters below the waters, and that he has made the heavens. Notice there's still a blue ring around the earth. This is the waters to be contained behind set boundaries to make the oceans and the seas. There's also still a blue ring around the outer atmosphere of the earth. Can you see that? This shows that the earth was still encapsulated in a gigantic water canopy. Obviously, this limited the aging process of living organisms and flesh because they were not bombarded by the solar radiation. All the patriarchs lived up to 900 years pre-flood. And also, if you want to know why the good book reports about stars such as Pleiades long before we knew they existed, long before Galileo invented the telescope, here's the reason why. It is reported in the Bible because you could see everything through this water canopy which magnified everything greatly. Note, when you go skin diving underwater and you look at a fish and you think it's about 30 centimeters long, when in fact when you pull it out of the water it's only about 5 or 6 centimeters because the water has magnified its size. Before God made the firmament, that's what you would see. You'd be looking straight out into the blue because there would not be any clouds. He divided the water from the water. So you'd be looking out there through a canopy of water. That's why the whole earth was one gigantic hothouse. The North and the South Pole did not have ice. That's why tropical ferns, tropical fish, tropical birds are all found in the North and the South Pole region. After Yahweh, the Creator God, divided the waters from the waters, that is the waters that were around the earth, that is when he made the firmament. In the good book it's referred to as the heavens. Then it says he gathered the waters to be behind their set boundaries and he called them seas. So in other words, then he divided the waters up around the earth to make the oceans and the seas, and ground or earth was formed, ready to be planted with the herbs and the trees. So let's look at our Earth's atmosphere. Air. In the Bible it's referred to as the firmament. It's a layer of gases surrounding the earth and held by the Earth's gravity. It contains approximately 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen and 1% argon and carbon dioxide, with traces of other gases and water vapor. Now the atmosphere protects life on the earth by absorbing the ultraviolet solar radiation and reduces the temperature extremes between the day and the night. The atmosphere, the water, the land, the trees, everything had to be set into place. Otherwise, nothing could live. This is what had to happen. When you ask the question, what had to be? This is what had to be before life existed. Now there's another component that is absolutely necessary, and that is wind or air currents. As anybody knows, if you've got a hothouse, you have to have air circulating, otherwise the plants will die. And here you're looking at the wind assisting the trees in the transpiration. Without transpiration, they would not be able to lift the moisture, the water, up from the roots of the ground, because in some cases big trees would lose tons and tons of water through evaporation and transpiration. Water hardness usually only measures the total concentrations of calcium and magnesium metal ions. Others, such as iron, aluminium and manganese, may also be present. Deionized water, or pure collected rainwater, is water that is void of minerals such as sodium, calcium, iron, copper, and anions such as chloride and bromide. Deionized water needs to be remineralized before used in aquaria, since it also lacks many macro and micronutrients needed by both plants and fish. This condition is amplified when water is running over a creek bed, which is full of minerals in the substrate. Pure rainwater lacks minerals and ions of calcium, which are normally found in drinking water. Drinking water must have calcium, magnesium and sodium minerals for our biological functions, such as our nervous system, homeostasis, and our digestive systems, and for the process in developing strong bones and teeth. A percentage of our daily consumption of these minerals and ions come from our drinking water. The lack of naturally occurring minerals in distilled or filtered water through reverse osmosis filters causes the body to become stressed, weakening the digestive and endocrine systems. Reverse osmosis products can be used for the production of deionized water. Back in July 2002, Singapore announced that a process named New Water would be a significant part of its future water plans. It evolves using reverse osmosis to treat domestic wastewater before discharging the new water back into the town reservoirs. Also, an ultraviolet lamp is used for disinfection of any microbes that may escape filtering by the reverse osmosis membranes. In other words, any nitrifying bacteria is also destroyed by ultraviolet. But guess what? Nitrifying bacteria is required to oxidize the toxic nitrites to a more compatible nitrate. Nitrifying bacteria are widespread in the soil and water, and without the right level of it in our intestinal tract, we can get bowel cancer. Nitrification is the oxidation of an ammonia compound in nitrate, especially by the action of the nitrifying bacteria called nitrosomas. The nitrites will then be oxidized to nitrates by the bacteria Nitrobacter, and this is very necessary in this water that we are looking going down this creek. Now I can put my hand in there and I can drink that water and it tastes beautiful. But you've got to remember that if we're out here in the bush where there's all sorts of animals, droppings and bird droppings and fish and things that have died in it, but why is it pure? Why does it taste so lovely? Because of the nitrifying bacteria. It has made all of the detritus matter inert, and it's no longer toxic to us. As a matter of fact, you can tell if water is pure. If there's healthy fish swimming around in it, then you know that that water is fit for human consumption. In this particular waterway, there are the Melanitania species, the Magurna, the gudgeon family fish. They would not live in here if that water was not pure. One other thing, they need to have a variation in temperature to procreate, so there has to be the winter and the summer, and they have to have infusoria to feed the newly hatched fry. And if these conditions are not met, then these fish could not exist. So what must happen? This is what must happen, what you're looking at, as you see it, as part of the ecosystem before those fish could exist. How does one equate this with natural selection or with evolution? Look at the veins and the ribs and the intricate detail in this leaf. I'll tell you what it's all about. It's about photosynthesis. And that's the conversion of light energy into chemical energy by living organisms. The raw materials are carbon dioxide and water. The energy source is the sunlight. And the end products are oxygen and energy-rich carbohydrates. For example, sucrose, glucose and starch.
This process is arguably the most important biochemical pathway since nearly all life depends on it. It is a complex process occurring in higher plants, phytoplankton, algae, as well as bacteria. And all plant life needs this to happen, and so do we. On day 3, Yahweh God made the oceans go back behind their boundaries. Then he made the ground, the earth, and of course the rivers and the creeks, and then of course the trees and the fruit and the grasses, making a proper habitat ready for the introduction of all of the insect, animal and bird life.
Grasses producing seed after their own kind. So there's a continuity of the food chain for specific insects and bird life in the ecosystem. Now what about this little fella? He's busy getting enough to eat for himself. He's got to eat 3 times his own weight. He only lives for a few days. And what came first? The flower or the bee? I mean, you don't have to be real smart to work it out. He's not going to live very long without some food. Martin, and he's a beekeeper. And as you can see, there we have thousands and thousands of bees in this hive. Now Martin, tell us a little bit about these bees. How far will they go to get a feed?
I'd say about 2 kilometres.
And how often a day do they do this and come back with a feed?
Oh man, they'll go till they drop, you know. I don't know actually how many trips they do, but they keep going from dawn till dark.
And what's the average lifespan of a bee?
I think it's about 6 weeks, 7 weeks.
So what has to happen first? They've got to have a flower. If there's no flower, there's no nectar, and they wouldn't live. Is that true?
That's right, yeah, they've got to, they've got to have flour and they've got to have nectar and protein and all the other stuff that goes with it.
And water? How much water do they need?
Well, for every, they've got to have water every day, but for every 50 kilos of honey, they take out 85 kilos of water.
And trees bearing fruit after their own kind.
After providing suitable food, fruit, grasses, seeds, etc., God said, "Let the earth bring forth living creatures, each according to its kind. Animals and creeping things, and beasts of the land, each according to its own kind." And it was so. "Behold, I have given to you all the herbage yielding seed that is on the surface of the face of the earth, and every tree that has seed yielding fruit. It shall be yours for food." Now we're right up to day 4 in the creation week. And it's not until now that Yahweh God makes the sun, the moon and the stars in the solar system. Why? Because he needs the sun and the moon to measure our 30-day months, to measure our daily 24-hour cycle, to measure our 4 seasons. And without these 4 seasons, this would not trigger procreation in many species. They need the changes in temperature to bring forth the abundance of plant life or food life in the food chain to feed the young of their specific variety, and it's the seasons that does it. What had to happen? This had to happen. If all this didn't have it happen first, if it wasn't set into place, nothing could exist. No life on this planet would continue to be life on this planet. It says on day 5 that he made the birds of the air, the whales, the fish, and all the mammals and all of the living creatures on the earth. And of course, on day 6, that's when he made man. Let's have a sensible look at the animal life, the fish life, and the bird life. All animal, bird, insect life are generally divided into herbivores, carnivores, and omnivores. How do you equate that with natural selection? Because they have to belong to one of those groups right from the beginning. And if you want to check this out with scientific data, go and get 20 scientists, get 20 viewpoints, because they'll certainly not agree with each other, and they'll have something like between 10 and 40 million years between their viewpoints. Let me say, you cannot change a herbivore into a carnivore. For example, you cannot, as the scientists did, add abattoir meat to the fodder for cows, so that the cows would grow bigger and heavier and there would be more money made out of the meat. But they forget, a cow has 2 stomachs. So what do you think happened? All of the meat that was in their fodder went sour and rotten in one of their stomachs, waiting to be regurgitated. The cows died and people got mad cow disease. You see, right from the very beginning, every species was perfectly designed to fit its specific, unique role in the ecosystem. And guess what? You'd like to discover the scientific proof of this? Well, you'll not find one relic, one fossilized juvenile of any transition from one species over to the other species. So that defeats the evolution argument. The very nature of the DNA prevents a crossing over from one species to another. For example, you can't cross over a reptile with a marsupial. The unique, specific part of each creature that it has to play in the overall ecosystem highlights that specific times, the temperature, the pH, the specific gravity, and the 4 seasons of hot and cold are essential to procreate, essential to trigger the creature to start breeding again. What had to happen? This is what had to happen. And this had to happen in creation, or nothing would be alive here today. Each fish or bird or mammal has been specifically and perfectly designed for special requirements in its life cycle, its lifespan, and in some cases the lifespan is so short, how could it take 1 million years to go through the so-called natural selection? Now I've got one of these beautiful king parrots, as you can see. It's a fully matured bird. It's got the light blue butterfly in the wing, and he's got the big red head and the red breast. Now, I think he must have been hand painted. What do you think? Eh? Could this fella happen with the Big Bang? Do you think it could happen with natural selection? Well, let me say something. If there wasn't seeds here for this fella to eat when they were first come into existence, they wouldn't have lasted any more than 30 to 40 years, because that's their total lifespan. Now look at this beautiful little species. This is the mountain Larry, or the red rosella, up in the Lamington National Park. They come out of the trees and feed on your hand. But just have a look at how exquisite the colour, how beautifully, it's got to be hand painted. What do you think? One thing for sure, how does it equate to the natural selection theory? I mean, if there was no seed for this fella to eat when he first arrived, well, the first pair would not have lasted any more than 30 to 40 years, because that's their lifespan. Beautiful male of the regent bowerbird. Isn't he gorgeous? Tell me if that's not hand painted. I'm here with Caroline, and look at that. She is feeding the regent bowerbirds. And Caroline, what do you think of those coming down out of the bush?
Got to be hand painted.
It's got to be hand painted. And have you got a message for Mum?
Come again, Mum.
There you are, Mum. You've got to come and see this. So here we are, as said before, day 6. This is when Yahweh God made man and woman. He's all made all of the animals. But let's look at man and how awesome and beautifully we are made. We have a brain that has a capacity to hold more information than all of the computers in the world, and yet it is over 70% water. How awesome is that? It's got billions of neurons in their brain, and if they're not wired up in a correct manner, well, we're a little bit silly. So do you think that they're wired up by chance out of a Big Bang? How do you equate that with natural selection? We've got 4.25 million miles of lymphatic system, which takes out the dross and brings in the nutrients to our bloodstream. How could that happen? By a big chance, or by a Big Bang? How awesome we are made. So let's talk about the DNA. Can you see in your screen there's a pin? At the top of the pin, a little black spot. That's a seed. That's a seed of a eucalyptus tree, and that will grow up to 100 foot tall. Now all the DNA necessities are in that tiny weeny little seed to make a whopping great big tree. And we all know that the sperm of a man, one tiny little sperm, naked to your eye, and it grows up into a fully fledged man. So how is that DNA locked in there? Did that happen with a big bang? How do you equate that with natural selection? The first one had to be perfect, didn't it? Well, it says in the good book that Yahweh God the Creator rested on the seventh day after he'd made all of these beautiful things, and he blessed this seventh day, sanctified it, set it aside to be a holy Sabbath day of rest for all mankind, to memorialize him and to memorialize creation. Now, in closing, I just remind you that if you go into the Google video section and ask the question for God's name, there is an interesting video clip that we did on this matter.